So I'm out here talking to myself like a maniac. So I decided to keep these diary entries for my Japanese learning, partially to keep myself accountable, but I kind of just want to see how I progress over time as well. So this is day 1 of me recording diary entries, but it is day 123, I believe, of me actually learning Japanese. Today's a pretty special day, and the reason I thought to make this on today specifically was because I completely switched my deck to my Anki deck to audio only on the front and in English definition on the back. I'm completely ditching the written language and reading, and I want to only focus on listening to the language and just understanding it. And the reason I'm doing this is because last night I was pausing my immersion, I was listening to the Kanji Eater podcast with Matt vs. Japan, and on that he said that, he always talks about doing the cutting edge strategies for language learning, and his current strategy for learning Chinese was he was only going to listen to audio. He was never going to try to read, because reading can mess up your nativeness in the language because of, subvocalization, and it's just, I guess it kind of makes intuitive sense to me, but that's not the way babies learn language. Babies don't learn reading in parallel with their listening. They just they learn listening first and understanding first, and then they start to output, and then finally once they get to school age they start learning to read and write. And I think that's kind of the basis for this new approach. So I'm outside walking, by the way, in case you can hear the crickets and the night noises. So I have 2 decks in rotation that I go through every day. I learn cards through. One is like a grammar deck, and it's very bare bones, but it's basically like a sentence deck where it just gives cards with audio. It used to have the written language out in sentences, but I changed the card template so that it didn't include any of the reading. But basically, it's based off the Thai Kim Grammar's Guide, and it just gives progressively more complex sentences in Japanese to kind of teach grammar in a bare bones way. So I modified that today to only have audio on the front and all the other information on the back, like the meaning of the sentence and all that. And then also, my other deck is the Kaishi 1.5K deck, which just has the 1,500 most common Japanese words. And I'm just doing both of those. But today was the first day I really switched to audio only. And so I've been doing 6 new cards a day in the Kaishi 1.5K deck, and I continued that today, and my reviews were about 80. It used to take 20 minutes whenever I had the written, when I had the readings on the front, or not the readings, just the kanji and the words. But I switched it to audio, and it took me an hour today. Dude, so this kind of just proves my own thoughts that I've been relying too much on reading, and I've kind of allowed my brain to do readings, because whenever I watch anime, I do listen. I do passively listen to podcasts and things, but whenever I'm actively listening or watching, it's always anime with subtitles. And I think I've just allowed myself to get away with kind of like just watching the subtitles constantly and not like listening to the actual audio, but just looking at the subtitles. And this is horrible because if I actually go to Japan, you know, the main goal is to be able to talk to people and understand what they're saying to you. They're not going to have subtitles. I'm just relying on subtitles again, but Japanese subtitles rather than English, you know. At my beginner stage. I'm sure that if I kept going with what I was doing, it would get there. But I think for my goals, I want to make the best out of my first year and make sure that I don't try to get the best, like as close to foreign or native level as possible, the most efficient way I can. And I think the best way to do this is to just eliminate any readings. So anytime I ever think about Japanese, like any Japanese word, it will be when there's audio in front of me playing, not me reading it. And I think this is kind of a heated topic because I think it is easier to learn grammar and structures like that when you read rather than when you listen. But I think, and you can do that faster, and you can pass the JLPT like easier if you read. And I think people, and I did a lot of research on this. People don't like doing like audio only, and I think it's just because people have different ideas. You know, I want to get best at Japanese, mostly understanding the spoken language, and hopefully myself being able to speak it once I feel confident enough to do that. But I think some people, it kind of seems to me like some people just want to get to a high level on the JLPT so that they can like brag about that. And like obviously what got them into it is anime and wanting to be able to understand it. But I think it kind of became a thing where people only care about the JLPT or like achievement-based things that are kind of like put on the language, if that makes like retrofitted on the language. Like there's no, these milestones are just arbitrarily set by like governments or whoever runs these tests, you know, like the JLPT. Like it's just like language doesn't have any point where you're a native or you completely understand the language, but these people, you know, are trying to hit those arbitrary achievements. So that's why people don't like, I don't know if that made sense at all, but the point is, I think that's why people don't like only audio. But I think from what I've been thinking and from what the research says, so at this point I think that if you want to try to get to a native language or a native level in whatever language you're trying to learn, just listening to audio at the beginning is the best way to do it at the start, and it's the best way to not develop any bad habits, listening to only audio. But anyway, that's why I switched. How I'm actually doing, I feel I switched to no subtitles on my anime today. I watched a couple episodes. Obviously I was also passive listening. I feel like I'm lost again. I feel like I'm maybe back at like my second week. It's kind of sad. I think it just shows how much I was using the readings or like the words, the subtitles as a crutch. But I know that obviously I'm not back at square one. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep recording these diary entries. And yeah. So another thing I wanted to talk about real quick, just to my first diary entry, is why I wanted to learn Japanese in the first place. So, I'm not really, like, super big into anime. Like, I like it, but I'm not into that, like, culture. I know a lot of people who are, and I'm around those people, but, like, otakus, but I would not claim to be one. I don't own any anime merch or anything like that, or like anything related to Japan, really. But the reason I got onto this was because I've always wanted to learn another language, and I found out recently that my family is going to go to Japan this spring break, which is in March, and I found this out in July, and it's October right now, for reference. So I have, from right now, I have like, how many months is that? Like 5 months, 6 months to learn Japanese from this point on. And so far I've been doing it for about 4 months, but there was a big period, like a month-long period, where I was still doing my Anki, but I was not immersing at all, and I wasn't adding any new cards. I was just keeping up with the reviews because I didn't want my streak to go away, basically, and I was really considering just dropping it. But I knew in my heart that I didn't want to. Like, what am I going to do with my time anyways? And also, like, this is something I wanted to do, is learn another language. And, I want to learn a language, and the concept of learning a language is cool, but the only language I've ever been really interested in is Japanese, because I have watched, like, probably before I started learning Japanese, I watched about 10 animes. But I've always thought it's really cool, and I've wanted to watch more. I plan to watch more. And then, I started watching Matt vs. Japan after I had this revelation. Also, I think it's kind of like, I think the reason I want to do it is kind of vain, I want to look smart. I want to just be able to show off to people that I can, like, maybe I have this fantasy of whenever I go to Japan, I'm just like the king. I can talk to anybody. Everyone's so impressed with how well I can talk. So that might be a good motivator for me. I know that's not really like the most realistic scenario, but I think it would be pretty cool. And I just kind of imagine that in my head. It's kind of embarrassing, but that's just what I imagine in my head. That's a good, like, motivator. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, I do want. That's the vain reason I want to do it, but it also is. So that's the reason I started doing it in the first place. But it's been really fun, I think. It's just like, it's cool to see this new world and, like, experience it through my immersion. And it's like I'm slowly unlocking this, like, new dimension of culture and other people that I've never thought of before. And, like, I know, like, another motivator is, like, someday I'll be able to interact with these people and completely understand them just as well as I do in English. And it's just like, it's crazy that there's these people on the other side of the world from me who evolve completely separately from where I live and from, where I come from. And they have their own language. And that's one of the reasons why Japanese is so hard compared to from an English native learning Japanese. It's so hard because it evolved completely separately. It comes from Chinese. It's like an Asian. So, like, every other language came from, or I don't want to say every other, but, like, most other languages came from Europe, and that's where English comes from. So it's easy to learn, like, Spanish and French and German. It's way easier to learn those than Japanese, because Japanese comes from just a completely different, like, way of thinking, almost like, I know they borrowed kanji from Chinese, and like the thought of kanji is really cool as well. Like, another thing that I think of is if I ever get to, I know I switched off of reading, but whenever I get to the point where I do read, if I get to the point, so I've been, so a little bit of background on me before I say this is I've been trying to read fast in English because I was studying for the ACT, and the ACT is a test that really requires you to be able to read fast and just like extract as much information off of a piece of paper as possible, and be able to process it in your head. So I was trying to read and like speed read, and in English, there's 25 characters, some punctuation obviously, but there's 25 characters, and they all come together to form words. And the way to read fast is you kind of just have to train your brain to be able to recognize these groups of words. Oh crap. Sorry, I think I wonder if somebody's able to hear me. Here. I'm gonna move away from the people a little bit. Sorry. Alright, so what I was saying is, for you to read fast, in order for you to read fast, your brain has to group all these combinations of these 25 letters together. And I just think that's inefficient, because there's only 25 letters. And it's not like each letter represents a concept or something. It's each word has its own concepts and ideas around it, and your brain has to recognize that based off just the grouping of those characters. It's not like it's kind of hard to explain my reasoning behind this, but I just think that if I get to a point where I'm able to read Japanese fast, it's a lot more efficient to read Japanese, because the kanji are every kanji is unique, and it's not like English letters where there's only 25 of them. There's 3,000 commonly in use, right? But there's way more. But yeah, so each one is unique, and it would be way easier to recognize words off of a page and be able to skim. And I know I'm never going to have to take the ACT again, but I just think that's pretty cool. And if I did have to, it would probably be easier if I think Japanese is more of an efficient language to skim because of that, maybe. I could be wrong, though. It would be interesting to hear from somebody who's learned both Japanese and English, which one is easier to read. But I don't know, I've heard that some people, once they learn Japanese, they like it more as a language because it's more efficient. But that was a huge tangent. But that's just one example of how I think Japanese is cool. And it's what keeps me going, and it's what's kept me going for 120 days, and I don't plan on stopping. And also, that trip to Japan, that's a huge motivator right there, It's not like I'm going to stop now, in the middle of my interval between my trip, when I learn about my trip to Japan and whenever I'm going. That would be so lame. Yeah, I think I've hit all my talking points for today. I'm gonna keep recording these diaries. I'll explain why I'm out here. So I like going on these walks at night, and this is just a perfect time to record these, because usually I've been immersing, but it's hard to, I don't know, I'm at the point where immersion, like I don't really understand what they're saying. Like I can pick up the words, like the nouns or the key words that I've learned, but I'm not like good enough at grammar to put it all together. So it's pretty hard to just walk. Like I like to play video games or whatever while I do the audio podcast immersion. So at least I have something else to stimulate my brain. But when you're walking, I mean, it's kind of boring, almost. So maybe it'll be a good time to record these. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. Yeah, I think I'll end it right there.